Hello, Year 5, and welcome to Thursday's SPAG lesson. So today we're carrying on some work with our parenthesis. So what I'll do is we'll just go over the same slides that we went over on Tuesday, just as a reminder about what parenthesis is. And then at the end of it, there are some questions. There are quite a lot of questions. The expectation in school wouldn't be that you completed all of them. It would be that you completed probably 4 of them. So go through all of the questions and decide how much you want to challenge yourself, but you don't need to answer all of them. I know that it would take a long time otherwise, and remember that this is only a half an hour slot in school. So let's have a look first of all at our word of the day. So our word of the day today is pragmatic, which is an adjective. A pragmatic way of dealing with something is based on practical considerations rather than theoretical ones. A pragmatic person deals with things in a practical way. So it means if you're pragmatic about something, it means that you're looking to get the job done, essentially. So Mr. Goodwin had a pragmatic approach to good behavior. You can turn it into an adverb by saying pragmatically. So he pragmatically solved the number sentences would be another way that you could use it. So can you have a go at using the word pragmatic or pragmatically in a sentence? Okay, and let's have a look and remind ourselves of what a parenthesis is. So parenthesis is when extra information is added in the middle or at the end of a sentence, very similar to a relative clause, which is a type, an example of parenthesis. A sentence should still make sense if the parenthesis is taken out. And we had a look at these examples here. So my granddad, comma, who is 84, comma, loves to play chess. My granddad loves to play chess. If I take that parenthesis out, it still makes sense. And I went to Paris, brackets, which is in France, close brackets. If I take that parenthesis out, which is the bit in red, I went to Paris, still makes sense. Parenthesis can be demarcated by commas, dashes, or brackets, which is what you were having a look at last lesson. So my best friend, comma, who I've known for ages, comma, is coming to my house, can also be, instead of commas there, you can use dashes or you can use brackets. If it's in the middle of a sentence, it needs to have commas either side of it or bracket or dashes either side of it. If it's at the end of a sentence, it only needs to be introduced by a comma or a dash. Brackets go around the whole parenthesis though. So I love reading books, comma, horror books are my favorite. I love reading books, dash, horror books are my favorite. I love reading books, open brackets, horror books are my favorite, close brackets. So that's the only difference between the different bits of punctuation. Now, some of the questions as we get later on here do try and trick you a little bit by using commas and things for fronted adverbials as well. So do read the sentences really carefully. Here is page 1 of your questions. Remember, the expectation is not that you complete each and every question that is here. Do as many as you feel comfortable with. I would spend half an hour on this lesson, and however much you end up doing, brilliant, because that's what the approach would be in school. So here are some questions. So for 4A and 4B, you need to identify which of those sentences uses parenthesis correctly. Some of them have got the punctuation, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're using it correctly. So read the sentences very carefully. Remember, you should be able to remove parenthesis and it still made sense. 5A and 5B has got 2 people, one of whom in each example has used parenthesis correctly. Can you work out who it is and how you know? Same sort of thing here for question 8. You've got the same concept as the last question, but there's some other things in there that you might need to think about. For question 9, which sentence does not use punctuation for parenthesis? Have a look at those 2 questions and explain how you know. And here are your answers. So for question 4, C has used the correct punctuation to show parenthesis. We can see in the corner of my bed is the parenthesis, and the sofa bed is used when my friends come to stay and when Granny comes to visit, still makes sense. The other ones, the sofa bed in the corner of my room is used and when Granny comes to visit, doesn't make sense if I took that bit out that's in the dashes, and the sofa bed when Granny comes to visit also doesn't make sense. So that's a really good way of checking. If you take it out, does it still make sense? For 4B, the school fair, comma, which takes place on Sunday. So which takes place on Sunday is the parenthesis. And if I remove that from the sentence, the school fair has a range of different stores, though the tombola is the best. That still makes sense. The second sentence doesn't need commas there. And the third sentence has done something very similar to A, but it's used brackets instead. And again, if I take that parenthesis out, the school fair has a range of different stores and the tombola is the best. It still makes sense as a sentence. For question 5A, Sean has used it correctly, even though she was afraid of heights is the parenthesis. So if I took that out, she attempted the high ropes and faced her fears. That still makes sense. Whereas this, Hannah has used a comma to separate the clauses. With Steph and Gabriel, it's Gabriel, which meant that the children had to stay inside at lunch at break time is your parenthesis. So it was a snowy day and the school closed early, still makes sense. And Steph, again, has used a comma just before a new clause. Let's look at the other questions. In 8A, Alice has used it correctly, which was the last game of the season as the parenthesis there. Johnny has used commas for a fronted adverbial and for a list. So he has used 2 commas, but not for a parenthesis. So we need to be very careful there. And in 8B, Ben is the one who's used it appropriately. They did not want to be late is the parenthesis there. It's at the end of a sentence, which is why it's only got 1 dash. For 9A, B is the one that uses it correctly. Oh, sorry, which does not use punctuation for parenthesis. So Xian, Kelly, and Lucy play for many school teams because they love to play different sports. That's just got a new clause in there. And with the second one, we can see that we've got a comma for a fronted adverbial, but we don't have any punctuation for parenthesis. Hopefully that was a good way of refreshing your memory. Next week, we'll be moving on to using parentheses instead of just recognizing them.